Hi, everyone. Welcome to the February 2017 Speaker Series featuring Dr. Yagna Pathak. We're going to get started in just a minute, so hang tight.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Okay, great. So just to quickly introduce Dr. Yagna Pathak, she's currently a research fellow, a research scientist at Columbia University Medical Center, and she's going to give us an enlightening talk about how to really kind of navigate your finances while deciding on a career in STEM fields. And she's really passionate about getting more women or advancing women in STEM fields. And we're glad to have her on board as part of the SPEAK Mentorship team as well. So I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from her today. So introducing Yagna Pathak. When you're ready.
Thank you so much, Hetal. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And I'm actually going to go through the talk very generally about how to manage your finances before you get into college and also through college. And then maybe I'll talk a little more specifically about the path that I took. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. And if at any time, if you can't hear me, because I am logged in through the app, please just message me or message Hayden or something, and we'll get that worked out. So thank you again. And the talk is called Rolling in the Debt. And hopefully you won't be rolling in debt if you manage your finances properly. So moving on. So obviously the first thing that, we're probably asking ourselves is, why should I be financially responsible? And it seems like a silly question because, of course, everyone needs to be more financially aware, in order to manage their money better. But more specifically in the context of college, average tuition costs are, skyrocketing right now. Private colleges cost, on average, over $30,000 a year. It can also depend on whether you're going to a public school in-state or out of state. And a lot of times, the more elite colleges might be out of state for you, or they might be private. And so hopefully this talk will help you understand how you can manage your finances better so you can attend these institutions and get the degree that you want, and also why you should be cognizant of your finances, and also why it's still worth it to invest in the career and the dream that you eventually want. I would like to mention at this point that the average debt right now per student is about $37,000 when they graduate from college. And currently, student loan debt is the second highest consumer debt category, only second to mortgage debt. So it's definitely a problem because of how we have been borrowing, and also how much higher education has gotten expensive. But just because things have gotten expensive does not mean that they're no longer accessible to us. As long as we work intelligently, I think we all still have the access to the education that we really want. Okay, so we'll start off by talking about some cardinal, steps of how to manage your student loans. So first of all, all of you are currently either thinking about applying to colleges or have already applied to colleges and are waiting on your acceptance letters and the packages that they're offering you. So the very first thing that I would suggest you do is think about borrowing responsibly. And by that, what I mean is eventually, when you get your acceptance letter, or if you've already gotten your acceptance letter, it will usually come with your financial aid options. And read the financial aid package that your college is offering you carefully, because a lot of times they will offer you scholarships, they will offer you student aid that you actually don't have to pay back. And then, once you've looked at those options, then you can think about the leftover tuition amount that you may have to actually borrow money for. I would also think about family contributions. A lot of times you can get a loan from your parents, which might be either interest-free or maybe at a lower interest than what a private lender is offering. So really think about what your family can contribute to your education. Maybe work out a plan with your parents or your older siblings in terms of help me pay off my tuition, and I will pay you back within so many years of college. So usually families will be a little more reasonable in their interest rates than private lenders will. Sometimes parents will just do it for free. So really think about how else can you finance your education without student loans. Another thing to stress here is once you do figure out how much student aid you're getting, how much scholarships you're getting, and how much you have borrowed, budget carefully, right? You don't want to go, if you've borrowed $20,000 a year from your private lender, you don't want to spend so much that you're going over that, because that debt is going to end up on your credit cards. Which also brings me to my next point, that credit cards right now are targeted towards young college students, and a lot of times college students sign up for these credit cards because they really want the free products that are offered at these booths. But really be aware of what these schemes are offering to you, whether there's an annual fee, whether the annual fee is only waived for the first year, how many transactions do you have to make, how much. If you do sign up for a credit card, is it linked to a checking account? And if so, do you need to have a minimum balance? Because a lot of times we sign up for these credit cards for all the free goodies that go along with it, and then forget about the rules or the fine print that goes along with it, and it just puts us into more debt than we're ready for. So really think about that. Think about budgeting, and think about whether you're staying within your budget. And then the last thing that I would like to talk about in the steps for student loans is that once you've borrowed, once you've gone through college with a sensible budget, you're going to graduate and hopefully have a job, and you're going to have to start repaying your debt. When that time arrives, really think about options on how to repay your student loan. When does your interest rate start, when does your interest start accruing? Does it happen the day that you graduate? Does it happen 6 months after you graduate? A lot of student loan mechanisms allow you to defer your loans for up to 1 year after you've graduated, but your interest already starts accruing. So even though you're in the period of deferment, your student loans are just getting higher because the interest has already kicked in. So really think about the timing of when your interest kicks in, whether you're in a position to start paying off your loans. Think about the different payment plans, and you can do that by utilizing a repayment estimator. And a repayment estimator usually tells you that, okay, if you are on a 5-year plan to repay your student loan debt, then how much monthly, how much do you have to pay in your monthly payments, whether you can afford that. how much, interest are you paying in your monthly payment versus how much principal are you paying in your monthly payment. So, and all of these tools are accessible to you through the financial aid website, which I have cited on this slide. And then the last thing to think about when it comes time to repay your student loans is loan forgiveness programs. So a lot of times, if you work in public service, your student loans are forgiven. If you end up being a physician and your student loans are a product of loans that you've taken in medical school, if you end up working in an underserved rural area, your student loans may be forgiven for providing a service where the demand is high and the supply is low. I also know that if you work in the field of academia, NIH has plans where if you commit to working in an academic field for a certain number of years, NIH will agree to pay off a percentage of your student loans. So there are a lot of mechanisms out there that even if you are in high debt, you can utilize these mechanisms to decrease the amount of student loans that you have by offering your services in the public sector. Okay, so as we talked about in the very first slide, borrowing is something that may be inevitable, but before you borrow, you really should think about all the other options that you can exhaust in order to decrease the amount that you're actually borrowing. So here are some alternatives that we can talk about that you can use instead of borrowing the full amount of your tuition. So for example, we talked about the financial aid package that your institution is probably offering to you. Usually when they offer you this package, the very first thing they'll talk about is how much financial aid that you can get that is actually subsidized by the government. And that's money that the government offers to you. It's usually need-based, based on your family's finances, and that's money that you don't have to pay back. Similarly, you can apply for merit-based scholarships, and that's, if you are really great at science and you're going to a tech school, they may give you a scholarship for being a future innovator, being a future leader. Or if you're an athlete, a lot of schools will offer you scholarships for coming and being a part of their athletic programs. So those are merit-based scholarships that you can look into that are very specific to your school. And then sometimes they also have very specific merit-based scholarships that are offered by the government itself. So you can apply for an undergraduate scholarship at the NIH if you're interested in the health sciences. You can also apply for these mechanisms at the National Science Foundation that also focuses on STEM. And the last thing that I'll talk about, which is very applicable to this audience, is diversity scholarships. So there are a lot of fields in which women and people of minority are still very underrepresented. And in order to increase our representation, they offer diversity scholarships that to incentivize, going to a certain school. So really think about, just every single mechanism that you can use in your favor in order to cut down on the actual amount that you have to borrow from private lenders. So financial aid is obviously one thing that you can look at in terms of scholarships and also what the government is offering. The second thing that I would really recommend here is work study. Most college students have had some experience working before they go off to college, but college is really a place to learn, and practical experience is one of the best ways to learn. So whether it is on-campus employment, whether you're like a desk monitor at the library or an RA or an orientation counselor, all of those things you may not make a lot of money, but you make enough to decrease how much you borrow. More specifically, in order to both advance in your field and also to decrease how much you know how much student loan you end up with at the end. Internships and co-ops are by far the most sought out opportunities. You can make money while you're on an internship or while you're co-oping, and you get an experience in your field, which really starts to make your CV or your resume look much more impressive. And the one recommendation or the one suggestion that I would make for internships and co-ops is start applying at least 6 months in advance. So if you want a summer internship, now is a good time to apply for it. You don't have to wait until your second or third year of college in order to apply for these. You can start applying for them right now. They have summer internships for high school students that pay you in terms of college scholarships. They have summer internships for first and second year college students. And then obviously beyond your second year, you can do a semester worth of co-op. Really, look at just leadership applications and internships offered by different companies, but also talk to your friends or your parents' friends in order to expand your network and see if you can find an opportunity that may not be publicly advertised. The very last thing that I'll talk about in terms of decreasing your spending and therefore also decreasing the amount of money that you have to borrow is just looking at your lifestyle. So if you live in New York City and if you're planning on going to a college in New York City, you have the option of commuting, which is probably a lot cheaper than having to stay on campus. If you are going out of state and you can't commute, you also have the option of staying off campus. Some universities don't allow for that during the first year, but beyond that, you kind of have personal freedom in terms of how you structure your lifestyle, and really thinking about where you live, how much you spend on meals. And this kind of goes back to the whole budgeting thing that we talked about in the last slide. So if you really focus on a budgeted lifestyle, that will really help you keep your finances in check as well. Okay, so to summarize sort of what we've talked about in terms of student loans and what are good practices, the very first, this is the order in which I would prioritize how you end up accepting money, right? So free money is the first thing that you have to accept, and that free money can come from scholarships or financial aid from the government. The second type of, money that you want is earned money, whether it's work-study, internships, co-ops, etc. And then once you've thought about, the free money that you don't have to pay back, earned money, also money that you don't have to pay back, only then think about borrowed money. And that is government subsidized loans, which have interest rates much lower than private lenders do. And then at the very end, I would think about, getting a loan from private lenders. There is a comment on this slide that I would like to point out. The optimist obviously will think that, so glad I don't have to take any more tests anymore, while the pessimist is going to be like, so bummed I have to pay off my student loans right now. The way that I think about it is that if you do have a job at the end of your 4-year or 5-year college career, then you're going to be making enough money in order to pay off your student loans. And there's no reason to be pessimistic about paying these off if you've been smart about how you've borrowed and how you intend to pay back these loans. So even though it's funny to think about, the burden that you might be in at the end of your college career, really just understand that the more attention you pay to details right now, the less burdensome it will become in 4 years when it is time to pay off any student loans that you may have taken. Which brings me to a very important point that invest in your dreams, right? Um, the little comic on this slide basically says that, you're here, you're basically walking into the philosophy department and you're saying you're here, but why are you here? And, don't let the finances scare you from investing in something that you're truly passionate about and that you truly see yourself succeeding in. Whether that be STEM or a different field, really understand what you want to do and what you like to do, uh, and then think about whether the institution that you're choosing will allow you to do what you want to do. And then think about the finances. And I say that because it is very important to pursue your interests because careers last longer than 4 years. And if you pick a major that you're not interested in, and even if it is a major that allows you security at the end of it, you'll basically end up in a career that's going to be very unfulfilling and very unsatisfying. And there are alternatives to that. I'm not saying that pick a major that has no promise once you're done, once you're done with college. What I am saying is that college really is a time to pursue your interests. And so if you're interested in English literature and if you don't think you can, if you don't think that you want to teach for the rest of your life, then maybe, choose another major to go along with English literature so that you do have job security at the end of it while you're still pursuing something that you're truly interested in. Colleges have the options of double majors, but they also have an option of doing a minor where, I've talked about, these options with my mentee currently, that you can choose to major in something that seems very practical, like, engineering or applied math or statistics. All of these majors seem very practical because they do have promise of a secure job at the end of your 4 years. But say you're interested in, archaeology. There's no one stopping you from choosing archaeology as a minor. And regardless of, how many majors or how many classes you take per semester, if you're enrolled as a full-time student, your tuition doesn't change. So this is another way to get like the most for your buck, where if you do end up doing a double major or doing a major plus a minor in 4 years, you're still going to be paying just as much as you would have paid if you only picked one major. Not saying you should stretch yourself thin. Do what you are able to do in the time that you have set aside for yourself. But at the same time, be aware that there are options to be practical and to be financially responsible while still pursuing your interest. And so on that note, I would also say that, college is a very beautiful time in your life, and expand your comfort zones while you're there. Explore new opportunities and really learn from every experience. Of course, learning how to manage your finances is one of the first skills that you will have to master. But then beyond that, learn how to communicate with people that have opinions that are different. Learn how to communicate your own opinions to these people so that you can solidify your own logic, right? Be open to changing your perceptions. Be open to new experiences, and really allow yourself the opportunity to expand your comfort zone, because that's really what college is all about. It's really about learning and having the experiences that sort of mold you into a better character. And then last but definitely not the least is have fun, right? College is supposed to be a time when you make friends that will last you a lifetime. You build a network of mentors, whether it's with your professors or upperclassmen. These could be your future colleagues, future collaborators, definitely your friends forever. And, this is a time that you'll look back on 10 years from now and just be like, oh, I remember when I was a freshman in college and I did this one thing. and it was so much fun, and I wish I could go back and do it again. And maybe now you don't have 10 years, you may not have those same opportunities to travel, to to take a course in calligraphy, which basically allowed Steve Jobs to expand Pixar and also Apple. So really just have fun, do the things that you really have always wanted to do, and just know that while things can become overwhelming, these are the years that you're going to remember forever, and you want to look back upon them, joyfully. And if you've made some smart choices in terms of how much you're paying, so you're not spending the rest of your life paying back your student loans, and also in terms of career choices, I think that everything else that you add to these two major decisions will allow you to grow as a person. And so, the picture right there is just a picture of me with a mannequin, and that's one of my late nights in lab during graduate school. And I put this picture on there to kind of emphasize this point that if you are pursuing something that you're really, really passionate about, then no amount of work is going to make you not have fun while you're doing the thing that you really enjoy. So, kind of want to bring that back to the full circle, that if you really pursue what you're passionate about, you are going to have fun pursuing that, and you're basically going to end up living your dream once you're done with college. And so when you do think about finances, really give that a major thought, that it's not just paying for college, it's really an investment in your dream, which is going to last more than just
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I think we're having a couple of issues, whether it's on my end or if it's on Yagna's end. I'm actually not sure, so bear with us a second, but we should be seeing the slide that says additional resources at the moment, and we should be back online with Yagna in just a moment.
some additional resources that I've linked to on this slide right here. You can get more information about different scholarships that are offered both through the government and also through specific institutions, whether they're your colleges or other funding agencies like NIH or NSF. There's a link on here that is really a resource that's offered to budding college students by the government, and it's to help you come up with a budget, which I think is one of the most important things that you can do in order to manage your finances. And the very last link on here is just a great article that I found that talks about the decisions that you will need to make and the financial considerations that need to go into those decisions that you make. For example, that article talks about different states and the average tuition and the average student debt in those states. Like, for example, New Hampshire ranks the highest in terms of how much student debt there is, while Utah ranks among the lowest in terms of how much student debt there is. But if you think about more specifically, maybe a lot of students that go, the major institution of Utah is University of Utah, which is a public institution, and a lot of students that may go there may be students, whereas the major institution of New Hampshire is Dartmouth, which is a private Ivy League school, and regardless of where the students come from, a private school tuition. So think about which states, which schools, how much money on average you'll be spending there, and also the most important thing, when you go to that institution, will you really have the experience that you're hoping for? Will it mold you into the adult that you want to be at the end of your 4-year college career? So think beyond the 4 years of college when you're choosing which institution to go to and whether or not the finances are.
Hey, Yagna, are you still there?
Yeah, can you go on?
Okay.
And so lastly, I'd just like to introduce our speaker for next webinar, which is Yagna Pathak. She is a patent attorney in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She is also my sister. And that webinar will be on April 1st, 2017 at 1 p.m. And I'd like to open it up for any questions regarding finances, or also just regarding STEM pathways and the path that I.
Sure, it's cutting in and out a bit, but actually, since we have quite some time left, would you be able to, we do have a question from Shanu, but before we get to the questions, can you just let us know exactly your path? Just what exactly did you do in high school to determine what college was right for you financially, and how did you plan for that during college, and then how did you plan for that before grad school? And perhaps a little more details would be around how long it took to pay off student debt, or anything about, those issues.
Yeah, so I'll start off by just talking about, how I ended up at the undergraduate institution that I ended up at. And that was kind of serendipitous in that I was really inspired I was really inspired by medicine, but I was also really inspired by physics. And when I was 12, I saw the Independence Day, and I wanted to be a neurosurgeon in space. That's basically what I wanted to do, which sounds kind of silly, but it kind of the classes that I took in high school, that's how I decided which classes to take. And so I ended up taking all of the AP sciences that were offered at my high school. And at the end of my high school career, I researched on different paths that I could take in order to go to medical school, and I realized that of all the paths that I could have taken, engineering sounded the most appealing to me. And so because I wanted to be a neurosurgeon in space, I applied to a bunch of universities as an aerospace engineering major. And the day of my interview at Illinois Institute of Technology, which is where I went for undergrad, my mom basically saw that I was interviewing with all of these engineering, and she thought it was absurd that someone who wanted to be a doctor would want to go into aerospace engineering. So she like, pulled out all of these brochures and she was like, look, I know you don't want to do biology. I know you don't want to do like psychology. I know you want to do something that's engineering related, but how about this major, biomedical engineering, which is a good intersection of engineering and medicine, both of the things that you're interested in. And at that point, I was like, fine, I'll just make my mom happy. I'll pick this major, and once I go off to college, I'll just switch my major back to whatever it is I'm interested in. And so I ended up interviewing with, faculty from biomedical engineering, and then, I got in to IIT. I also got into a bunch of other universities, but I ended up going to IIT because it was close to home. They were offering a good scholarship to me, and they had all the majors that I was interested in. So at that point, even though I was a biomedical engineering major, I wanted to eventually switch out back into aerospace engineering, which they offered. So those were the three things that I was like, okay, it's a good university, they're offering me money, and I have the option of switching out, which I really wanted at that point. But then after attending a few classes in biomedical engineering during my first year, I kind of fell in love, and I ended up doing that not just for undergrad, but also for my master's, and then I ended up getting a PhD. I didn't have too many student loans from my undergraduate education, mostly because of the scholarships and also help from my parents. I did commute for a year, and I graduated a year early, and so I think both of those did help in keeping the finances in check. And then whatever student loans that I currently have are from my master's degree, because in my PhD, I didn't have to pay tuition, and I ended up getting a stipend. So the student loans that I'm currently paying off are from my master's program. And I went to Cornell University, which is both out of state and also private, which kind of made my student loans higher than what they normally would have been for someone who only has 2 years or 1 year worth of debt. I just started paying off my student loans because like 2 years ago, and I'm currently on a 5-year path to pay them off. And I pay a substantial amount every month, but because of that, I'm hoping to be done in like the next 2 or 3 years. The second question that you asked about what can you do in order to really prepare for college, I would just say that my own perceptions and my own interests changed so much that I would allow for I would go to an institution that allows you to explore not just what you think you should be doing, but also things that you don't even know exist, right? So like I talked about biomedical engineering, and it's a fairly new field. I didn't know any biomedical engineers when I was in high school. I wish I did, because if I had, then I would have gotten into it a lot sooner than I did. But really, like, just if people offer opinions to you, really listen to them, and allow for your perspective to expand, and really guide yourself based on what you enjoy, and not just like what people think you should be doing, or not just based on a preconceived plan.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. I think really putting a personal touch to the financials is important for our younger audience, because usually we don't think about it at such a young age. I know I didn't as well. And if it weren't for my parents' guidance, it's really hard to put the finances and what you may have to pay off later on into perspective when you're only 17 years old. So we have a question from Shanu. Her question is, does taking summer classes affect how much you need to pay? Do you want to address that one?
Yeah, so summer classes do affect how much you have to pay, because the summer semester is its own semester, and so tuition in college works per semester. it may depend, once again, the summer thing may depend on your institution. So if you're on a semester system, then you might have a fall semester, a spring semester, and then you don't have the option of being a full-time student during the summer. So you may have to take, if you do end up taking summer classes, they may be based on, your tuition may be based on the number of credits that you're taking. But there are some universities that are on a quarter system, and so they usually have a fall quarter, a winter quarter, a spring quarter, and a summer quarter. And in these institutions, you do have the option of being a full-time student during the summer quarter, and so your tuition might not be credit dependent, and it may be whether you're full-time or part-time status. So depending on which institution you go to and how they treat summer courses, the amount that you have to pay may vary.
Great, thank you. If you have any other questions, feel free to type. I'll ask one actually about slide 4, where you talk about lifestyle, commuting versus off-campus housing, or sorry, not versus, just 2 different options when considering, when considering different options for being or attending a university. And I guess my question would be, how much more does it really cost? Let's say you're considering an in-state university, such as in New York City, and you have a home in New York, as well as considering an option for a university in New York. Is it, or what would you recommend in terms of maybe commuting or finding off-campus housing or dorming? How much does it really affect your the loans that you may take or your financial status?
Yeah, so great question. I would say that, if your home is within like half an hour to an hour of the institution that you're attending, and housing costs are as high as they are in New York City, then I think that amount is substantial. And I only say that because I live in Manhattan currently, and so I know how much I pay for rent, to be close to where I work, and and the student housing, though it's subsidized, it's pretty comparable. You're probably going to spend at least, if you're in New York, you're going to spend at least $10,000 to $12,000 on rent, and then if you add meal plans to that, it's going to be another, like another, like $1,000 to $3,000 per semester, so maybe $6,000 per year. So I would say, like, if you consider that, it's $15,000 a year that you might be spending more on room and board versus staying at home, and so that ends up being maybe like $60,000. But I also haven't taken into account like the costs of commuting. So taking the train obviously costs money. You're not going to stop eating out completely, so that's still gonna you're still going to be spending some on room and board, though not as much as if you had the option of staying home, and if you versus if you didn't have the option of staying home. Having said that, I will say that certain universities have a commuter culture, and certain universities do not. So if all of your friends are staying on campus, and if you're always commuting, then you are going to miss out on certain life experiences that I talked about in another slide that are very important to the college experience. So, I went to school in Chicago, and my family is also from Chicago. And my first year, I commuted. But my second and my third year, I ended up staying on campus because it saved me time. It allowed me to do more in terms of how many classes I could take. And it also allowed me to engage in more activities. So I could do more things with my friends. I could be part of, certain extracurricular clubs, etc. So I think, while my first year, while I was still adjusting, while I was still transitioning and still getting to know people, it made sense for me to commute for that first year, and it did save me some money. I think eventually moving on campus offered some experiences to me that I couldn't have gotten if I was staying at home. So I think there is a trade-off there. but I went to a school that really was sort of 60-40 in terms of commuters and on-campus residents or around campus residents. So I think that it really also depends on the university that you're at and the kind of culture that um, that that's appropriate for that university. So for example, when I was at Cornell, Cornell is it's a college, Ithaca is a college town, and everyone there was everyone there was an on-campus or an around-campus resident, and almost no one was commuting. So if you went to Cornell and if you were from Ithaca, then you would kind of lose out on a lot of experiences just because you were a commuter. Whereas I think in institutions that are located in the city, you have sort of a better balance between people who stay on campus or stay around campus versus those who commute. So I think the institution and the culture that they promote also is a huge factor in whether you choose to stay on campus or whether you choose to commute.
Great, thank you for that. I think that was a very well-rounded answer and helps put things into perspective for what you should really consider: finances, or maybe the experience that you mentioned, or the building lifelong relationships and friendships that you mentioned on slide 6, which actually brings me to my next question, and it might be the final question unless anybody else has one. But last year we had Ting Pen on. She's a co-founder of Value Penguin, and she also spoke in February about financial management, and she had similar advice about just considering having a minor or taking up a double major in order to have a future career that could be stable, if in case what you're passionate about may not be something that provides the financial stability that you're looking for in the future. So considering pursuing your passion or investing in your dream, that also goes hand in hand with going to a certain type of university, either public or private. So what are your thoughts on how one chooses between a public and a private school, and how far that can really take you, depending on the university?
Yeah, so I personally believe that, there is no one size fits all, right? So what might be a good institution for me may not be a good institution for someone else. And so for my undergraduate education, I went to a very small private school that specialized in, STEM education. And it worked for me because I was really able to pursue engineering at a different level. But then I've also been at, private schools that are much bigger, that do harbor a more, diverse crowd, and also like institutions that are so big that, that you have to take a bus from like one end of the campus to another end of the campus. And I feel like every institution really offers something very specific and something very unique. And I think you have to sort of make that decision for yourself, whether you can see yourself at that institution for the next 4 years or for the next 5 years, or if you end up doing graduate school, then like 4 plus whatever number of years. I would say that in terms of what I look for, or what I looked for in a university, I really wanted to go to a university that would challenge me enough that I was still motivated to push my own comfort zone. So I wanted to go to an institution that wouldn't allow me to just coast. So I wanted to challenge myself, and like I said, when I was talking about my personal path, that I really did want to go to a university that offered options within my my interests. So I think that whether you go to a public university or a private university, is it does affect your financial like considerations, but there are a lot of public universities that are on par with private Ivy League institutions, and if they can offer you the same atmosphere and the same environment to challenge yourself and to grow and to explore options, then, then by all means go to that public university. But say that your dream program is at Princeton University, and none of the other public universities, around New York or New Jersey can offer you the same, like say that, you've always worked with a certain professor and he works at Princeton and he's doing exactly what you want to do, you want to like train under his guidance, not just for your graduate education, but also for your graduate education. Then take that into consideration, that you're not going to get that experience at a different institution. You will only get that at that one institution where you're, like if you want to work with Neil deGrasse Tyson, then you have to go to Cornell. You can't work with him if you go to a different institution. I mean, he may come as a visiting lecturer, but you're not going to be able to build a relationship with that professor or with that program if you don't go to that institution. So I think I wouldn't say that a public school is better than a private school or a private school is better than a public school. What I would say is that think about a particular school and whether or not it offers the experience that you're hoping for.
I think that's sound advice, and I appreciate that. I think that's really good for, again, students to consider before they choose a school for the next 4 years. So as you've already introduced, our next speaker is Yagna Pathak, and she will be speaking on April 1st, 2017, same time at 1 p.m. You are also, Yagna, you're also a mentor for our SPEAK Mentorship mentoring program, and I just wanted to hear some thoughts about how mentoring is for you and why others should consider mentoring.
Yeah, I mean, I will say like what really motivated me to not just be a part of SPEAK, but also to sign up as a mentor was that I'm really passionate about STEM, and I want to see more young women go into STEM education, pursue fields that are not typically targeted to young women. And just a few days ago, actually, I was with my mentee, and she looked at this code that I was working on, and she was kind of terrified of my code. And I find that to be very, very, very exciting and very fun. And I wanted to sort of communicate that to her, that certain things may seem scary because they're not really targeted to us, but if you really get into them, if you really learn about them, if you really become familiar with them, then they kind of become less scary and more exciting. It kind of becomes like an adventure that you want to go on. And so that's kind of why I signed up to be a mentor, because I wanted more people to learn about STEM education and kind of decrease that level of fear that is associated with pursuing STEM fields.
Thank you. Any final words that you have, Yagna, for us?
No, it's a beautiful day in New York City, so I hope everyone enjoys their afternoon, and join us next month for the next webinar.
Great, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining, and we hope to see you April 1st for our webinar with Yagna Pathak. Have a good day.